My name is Professor Wunderlich. I'm a professor of engineering, architecture, and computer science. And this is an architecture lecture on architecture theory. And it's in a course that's Architecture Studio 2. I'm 60 years old now. I'm perhaps known more for computer engineering in the past 30 years than anything else. But until I was 30, I was pretty much all architecture and urban design. Coordinated all architecture, engineering, and construction of $100 million worth of projects in Texas and California. Also had several small renovation businesses of my own. I've done that in Pennsylvania and in California. Also had an estimating business. And so I've always been in architecture, even while I'm doing high tech. I've done some architecture. And now we have, I don't know, several dozen minors have gone through the system. We have 3 individualized majors and 2 more pending. And so at Elizabethtown College. I'm going to share a screen and go into this lecture for today. Switch to Google Chrome because Firefox does not cooperate with Zoom apparently on all things. So my website, you can see everything here and that I've done, including architecture courses. I'll go back to the syllabi here, syllabi page. So I've taught over 200 courses, close to 2,500 students, and 38 different courses. Mostly Elizabethtown College for 23 years. Also, I was a professor at Purdue University, and I taught at San Francisco State University and the University of Delaware, as well as the University of Trento in Italy. You can see all that. The architecture courses are bundled together here on a page, including lecture series. I have an architecture theory, which we're in now as part of the studio class. And then Frank Lloyd Wright and other things I have. These are the courses that I've taught and teach. So we're in Studio 2 now, which is also doubling as architecture theory course that I taught separately as a theory course before. So we're in here. Now I didn't put the very first lecture on YouTube. And I may not, or if I do, I'll make the PPT into a PPTX with embedded audio and then save it that way, because I already presented it in this class. But I want to try to record the rest. Form and space is already recorded, but form is not. So we're in form now. So I will narrate the PDF. Let's see, so if I change the camera angle here, my name seems to go over top of me. Up in the right-hand corner. Make this a little bigger. Luckily, this browser cooperates nicely with PDF, so I can just hit a button and it'll go forward. So, form. We already did primary elements. Now we're doing form. This is following the Ching textbook on form, space, and order. All the students are required to purchase, and then excerpts out of Frank Lloyd Wright, this book, and a number of other sources too. So just starting from Frank Lloyd Wright, nature had become my Bible. Forms were naturally significant of idea and purpose. Grow form in the realm of the human spirit. Aesthetic and structure become one. Form and function are one. He never believed form followed function and literally, the function was first. He meant it as one following the other, as in yin and yang, symbiotic, relying on each other. I won't play this little 9-minute video, so I don't want to play this in here, but the PDFs I always embed on YouTube below. And in the course, you have access to the PDF too, so you can just click on links. But I don't go on top of the YouTube videos and put links on top. You just go down to PDF if you want to go to links. This is a quote, one quote out of here. Science will eventually join with art and religion. And when they are one, then we will begin to have the right kind of education. We will have the right kind of buildings. We will have greatly improved methods of life. And I believe that myself, but it's convenient for me to believe that because I am firmly planted in both worlds of science and arts. So properties of form: shape, size, color, texture, position, orientation, visual inertia. The rest are self-explanatory. Concentration and stability of form depending on its geometry and the orientation relative to the ground plane, the pull of gravity, and our line of sight. So this is a perception, almost an emotion. So shapes, outline of planar volume, that's how we recognize things, we perceive things, and the contrast and the contours separating figure from the ground. So we're talking about negative spaces, now it's positive space, and what we see is relative to backgrounds and adjacent things. A silhouette can illustrate junction between mass and space. This building rises from the ground. Silhouettes. Here's a bunch of silhouettes. And you don't need a whole lot more detail to see the form. Even more, you probably can recognize, if not particular landmarks, at least regions of the world. Solids and spatial voids, foreground and background interlac to create the one whole, unified whole. Think of shape in two-dimensional figures. We should also visualize three-dimensional forms as they might represent. When you look at something 2D, try to imagine the 3D. And vice versa. Look at 3D, try to think of the 2D. And as an architect, you need to do that. Because people walking around don't always see elevations, and they certainly don't see the plan view or the site plan view. You should envision that. And then perspective distorts things. We understand foreshortening when we draw perspective. And you know, how you view it is not the real reality of that form in an elevation or a plan view or section. Build it, but we see that, and so you need to consider that. Closure, this psychological thing, refers to tendencies for open or discontinuous figure to be seen as if they were closed, complete, and stable shape. So we look for closure. We don't like things scattered. Like, we don't want to have to, you know, deal with COVID over and over again, think it's done, and then it's not done. We have no closure. That's the hardest thing about it. We're in sustained PTSD. Instead of one shock to get over, we've got it sustained. Even when a line does not exist, the mind's eye can create a line in an attempt to regularize a shape and make it visible. You've probably seen this in psychology courses or somewhere where you think you see something just by the way things are organized. Therefore, in addition to the outward shapes that are easily recognizable, it's important to discern the shape suggested by the principle of closure. Let's see. So this is Le Corbusier. And this is a common exercise from architecture school. We did this in a studio class when I was about your age. You take a cubic volume and you have to decide what goes in that cube, but you got to stick to the cube. And think about the solids and voids. So we have our primary shapes. We don't know. And then how do we feel about these things? A cylinder is centralized about an axis and can be easily extended. It's unstable when its axis is inclined. It may not literally be unstable, you structurally engineer it right. The cone and pyramid are stable on their base or can rest on their apex as a precious state of balance. The cube is very static and stable, and easy to structure as well as perceived as stable. The sphere and other curvilinear solids on their side can invoke a feeling of motion. The square represents the pure and the rational. This is, I talk a lot about this in my Frank Lloyd Wright lecture series. This is a profound thing that he designed after coming back from one of his trips to Japan before he lived there for 3 years. And if you walk in this neighborhood, imagine when it was built in 1905 and all the Victorians and some arts and crafts style things that were around. This was a really profound statement, but it's timeless and beautiful. Frank Lloyd Wright would talk. This is a summary of his whole life. I won't go into this here, but if you look at his lecture series, my lecture series on Frank Lloyd Wright, you can see that. And I'm writing a book on Frank Lloyd Wright. I'm actually doing a sabbatical in the spring of 2023 to put it all together. But he was influenced by a lot of things. I won't go into all here, but Asian thought, the Unitarian belief system, which is actually a Christian belief system, had a love of nature, and in a way was similar to some of the Asian Eastern thought. And then Froebel methods and the homeschooling through his mother, and Froebel influenced Montessori schools. And his father doesn't get a lot of credit because he, for a number of reasons, he couldn't actually afford to take care of the family after the Civil War, and there was an economic depression. And he was a preacher, and he was highly educated, but and a musician, two things that didn't pay a whole lot of time, and still don't really, but he influenced Frank Lloyd Wright quite a bit, and the farmland of Wisconsin. So strong geometric shapes in Frank Lloyd Wright's Unity Temple, the Froebel blocks that he played with, simple formed with the Froebel methods. This is the floor plan of the Unitarian Church. So you can't really tell from here, but when you walk through this space, this is where the ceremonies go on and the services go on. And then this is sunken down, and you got to wind your way in here, and almost like a little tunnel. And that compress and release thing that Frank Lloyd Wright's known for doing is intentional. And then you view at foot level as you walk along here, and you go up these steps. And then the light is all up above, big skylights, and the lights are up high. So you can't really get that from the floor plan. So, and you can look at elevations, everything, but you really got to be in this building to really feel this space. Maybe should have made a video of it. You get a little idea here. So you come in down below here, and then this space is really well lit up with skylights and bands of windows around the top perimeter. Sketch of that. We're just talking about simple forms here. So this is all around the cubic stable form. So this is the main sanctuary area. And then over here is gathering space, sort of a meeting area, kind of a vestibule meeting area in between, just to mingle, and then designated spaces for things over here, a classroom for children, and an exhibition place, and a fireplace. Now, triangle. So again, psychology, Gestalt psychology says we reduce what we see to the simplest and most regular shapes, which are easier to perceive and understand. A triangle is easy to recognize, and when resting on one side is stable. This is the Louvre, Mona Lisa's down here, down sort of below here. This is in Paris. I walked around this, but it was so crowded to get in, I didn't want to go in. I was more interested in the architecture and urban design. Triangle, again, this is in his studio and his home where he raises children, and got whole lectures on all of that. And the triangle. Just some other models of triangular things. triangle here. This is meant to be, he did this in his later years, amongst other designs that were for sacred spaces, churches, Christian and Jewish synagogue. I'm sure he would have done a mosque if somebody asked him to. Symbolized hands folding and praying. So he's getting up there in years now. He's near 80 here, I think. This picture. The triangle. This is the inside of that building. Triangle. Another one. Florida Southern College actually has quite a few Frank Lloyd Wright buildings. He designed most of that campus. And the interior view, still triangular. Triangular is computer model with that. This is right in Philadelphia. I haven't visited this. This is not one of my favorite things. It looks like something on a Klingon homeworld to me, but it's beautiful in the inside the pictures, and lit up at night, it's beautiful. And do some pretty fancy structural engineering to make all this work, because there's nothing tying across. It's like a shell structure. I would like to see the inside. This is something special inside. I don't care for the way it looks on the outside. And it might be fun to look up at night, although I probably think that the Klingons have landed. This would make, it would actually be easier to go to see the Guggenheim in New York as a field trip, or the salvaged living room of the home that's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art of Frank Lloyd Wright's. Because the train goes right there. We'd have to drive to this one. When you tip the triangle upside down, well, this doesn't feel right. You think that's going to fall over. This is where I did urban design at the University of California, San Diego, and I used to study up in here. I never felt like it was unstable, maybe because of all the structure here. That's quite a bit to hold it up. So how do we feel? Circle, the tower or whatever, so focal point is in the middle. That feels neutral. I'm not sure this feels, well, I guess stable if you think of this as a weight, unstable up here, equilibrium. And I don't agree necessarily with those, but certainly in the middle is stable, and usually off-centered is considered destabilizing. I'll show you examples of that. So circle, this is another circular one. Circle, circle, church. His later years, he was calling a couple years before he died. Greek Orthodox, Wisconsin. Circle, circle, circle. Guggenheim, certainly. This wasn't completed when he died, but he certainly was able to see most of it through, close to the end. I haven't been in here. I actually went one time and I forgot the museums were closed on a Monday. So I went to go see it. Oh, it was 30 years ago. I took my mom into New York City, and we wanted to see a bunch of things. I just had forgotten that the museums close on Mondays. I haven't seen the inside of this yet. And that's something to see. Now, this is it's a museum of art, so it's meant for exhibitions. Most artists will tell you they don't want the building to be something to draw attention away from the art. And a lot of artists complain that because it's a spiral and that people are walking downhill, and then the exhibits are, on the walls, but level, it's going to create a distraction for people. They won't see it the way it's supposed to be displayed. So you can get opinions on other people on that. I think most people agreed after it was built, though, it's pretty nice. And I doubt anybody who asks to have their art exhibited in the Guggenheim is going to turn it down. So the circle spiral, whoops. Hexagon, this is Kentuck Knob. We visited this on a field trip. All the architecture people, Dr. Pat Ricci and I, and Christy Arnold and Milt Friedley, and Michelle Kaz King. This is right near Falling Water. Oh, this is another Hexagon, California, that didn't get built. But, Franklin Wright had 500 built designs and 1,000-ish paper designs. I haven't seen this yet either. This is a Hexagon House. It's on the Stanford campus. I've been all over the Stanford campus, but I didn't even think of looking at this when I went to this a long time ago. Pretty famous house. It actually had some earthquake damage and got closed for a while. But then they got a big grant and repaired it. Hexagon. Hexagon. These are his bootleg houses. There's a whole story there if you listen to the Frank Lloyd Wright lecture series of mine. I certainly have a lot of it in the book, where he, Louis Sullivan took him on under his wing, even though Frank Lloyd Wright was quite a rebel and somewhat unpleasant to work with in many ways, according to many people. But Louis Sullivan was the king of skyscrapers in Chicago, and he was a rebel himself. And he gave Frank Lloyd Wright a loan for a lot of money when he was very young to build his house and studio. And then presumably Frank Lloyd Wright had a hard time paying it off, and then did these bootleg projects. We had a lot of trouble just paying for all of his expensive tastes. But the loan too. And Louis Sullivan seems to have looked the other way, even though it should have been obvious, because these bootleg houses are right on Chicago Avenue. If you walk on Chicago Avenue, I mean, there's plain as day there now, and there's new houses everywhere around. Back then, especially since there's signature styles of Frank Lloyd Wright with the banding of windows and some of the overhangs. That's a story for another time. This is something I won third prize for in a tri-state competition. I wasn't the best student in high school, but I was good at architecture from birth. I made this in high school, 16, presented in Philadelphia. I think I would have won if I finished it. I didn't get I had to have roofs and the rooms labeled, so I lost a bunch of points for that. I was still building it on the car as my mom was driving me into Philadelphia. So balsa wood. I had quite a few, 27 different buildings built with balsa wood of HO scale model railroading. And so this came naturally to me, whoops, to build balsa wood. And the students have access to balsa wood in my studio now. I keep that pretty well stocked. Developing forms. So one-dimensional lines and two-dimensional shapes move through space, create three-dimensional forms. Ruled surfaces generated by moving a straight line relative to a fixed point. Between a straight line and a curve, between two curves. More curved surfaces. Several classes of non-planar surfaces have a geometric basis but are more dynamic in form. And we'll first look at some Frank Gehry things. Now, this can be a structural engineering nightmare, and the Frank Gehry buildings typically can't use regular structural engineering software. They use aircraft modeling software because of all the curves. We'll see that in one example coming up later. Translational surfaces are generated by sliding a plane curve along another plane curve. Examples include cylindrical shells and parabolas. This is a famous church in France. This is not all shapes and forms can be distilled into regular geometric shapes. So you can have some freeform kind of things. Sydney Opera House shells is very famous. Curved. I'm not going to read it. I was going to go back and take out some of the words here. When you're giving a presentation, you don't want to have to read all these words, but doubly curved surfaces, the feeling and the structure that evokes. Grid shells are constructed of water, steel, lattice works. Now here's the Frank Gehry design. This is the Walt Disney Concert Hall. I've been meaning to get up here. I spend quite a bit of time in California every year. And COVID, again, the 2 years in a row kept me from going to see a number of things I wanted to see. The Hollyhock House with Frank Lloyd Wright thing, and honeycomb houses, and some of the textile house, other textile buildings. But I wanted to see this too. This is not Frank Lloyd Wright, it's Frank Gehry. Just passed away recently. So those of you, a number of you are engineers, and me too. Imagine trying to do your moment distribution and just simple beam bending on a curve like this with, I mean, what the heck? You definitely need a computer now to do this. And here's a study of it. Challenge and benefits of 4D modeling on the Walt Disney Concert Hall. It's a Stanford study. Computer modeling. Again, it's not, you're not going to do this in Revit. It's certainly not SketchUp. Although I believe SketchUp's a little easier with curves. Rhinoceros and Flamingo, if you're familiar with those modeling softwares too, architects certainly use. But Revit is the industry standard. And it ends up being constrained because it's the industry standard, because it feeds right into structural programs, HVAC programs, passive active solar things. It feeds into the suites catalog, all the database of material suppliers, and you can generate specifications from it. It's a real thing to really build with. If you're doing things in SketchUp now, that doesn't lend itself to any real building right away. So we're going to have to redo it in Revit kind of thing, or from scratch in AutoCAD. And Flamingo and Rhinoceros are a little better, but they're still not like Revit. That's why we use Revit. And I do really I encourage everybody in here, every architectural minor really should have Revit skills before they graduate. And if you're an individualized major, it's a must. So I'm going to be looking for that if you haven't done it yet to any extent. Minors too. So irregular forms we're talking about here. This is a regular form. This is the cruciform, it's called. I didn't put it on here, but that's the pinwheeled planes of Frank Lloyd Wright that he's known for. The Prairie House, you see it somewhat, but there's other earlier ones and later ones too, where he's taking these planes and rotating them and making a somewhat equal extensions out each side. The Prairie Houses tend to be more linear, but still have pinwheel plane aspects of it. This is the cruciform. Oops, that doesn't respond right away. This is strange. I think of this as like Lego man pants. It's kind of cool though. It's growing on me since when I first saw it. I was like, not in person, but I got to wonder how it looks at the ground level. I went to look at a Philip Johnson Crystal Cathedral in California a couple of years ago, and it's kind of cool looking from far away. When you get up close, and you find a lot of modern architects. So Philip Johnson was both postmodern and modern. It's not quite a human scale. I mean, you feel like you're being overwhelmed by some monstrous structure that's, in my opinion, not very welcoming. So developing a form in architecture, the majority of forms are derived from rectilinear Euclidean geometries. Okay. And as I mentioned, the rectilinear works better for construction, certainly in old days. And still to this day, you don't want to have to use aircraft modeling software to make your building. I'm not sure the developer would want to pay for that in most cases. Well, if you already had it, I'm sure the construction costs are more of a concern for the developer. To convince them that you're going to make Frank Gehry looking building, then it's worth it. Developing form, rising out of the ground, in relation to the ground. We still rely on flat and level floor plans for the base of our activities. Right? We want to feel grounded and stable. And we can move the walls around in the ceiling, but we don't want our floors to feel unstable. Form can be compressed into planar form or be stretched out into more linear one. Just feel the tension in an oval versus circle, not so much. Oh, this is where my good friends in Italy live. So I traveled to Italy a bunch, 6 times been there. I taught there, and would be back there actually now if I could. I can't with COVID. Although I have a student there. One of my students is at Pantheon Institute in Rome for architecture. Pause the video. So this is a central piazza in Padua or Padova, Italy, depending if you're speaking Italian or not. And this is my good friend. He's a professor at actually University of Trento, where I taught, but he lives in Padua, and his wife's a professor at the University of Padua. He's a part-time professor there, he's a full-time professor at the University of Trento. And this is this canal that's an oval shape, or it's not, most canals were built for transit of goods. This is purely architectural. Most forms are transformations of a primary solid variations generated by the manipulation of dimensions, adding and subtracting, altering, moving walls around, changing dimensions, extending things out, extending out. So you really feel this in Roby House. This is on the University of Chicago campus, and it really stands out. I'm sure it stood out more when there were none of the big buildings around it, but it's not. It's given some space. I mean, it's not encroached on too much to take away from it. The view from the back's not so good. There's a little deck around the back here in this building. We had lunch at, and you can sort of see the building, but it's not quite the way it should be viewed. But from the street, certainly, and down the street, you can see it, and you can just feel the transformation of form, the extension of the horizontality, the planes, being pulled out, extended, and you feel that inside the house too. And here's some models made of that. So transformation of form in different ways, attaching. If I was going to do this over again, I'd go and take some of the words out. You don't want to read that many words when you're presenting, especially in architecture. Subtractive and additive forms, subtractive void and additive form. Picture it like this on the right. Picture what you're doing in these terms. Adding cylinders and cones to rectangular shapes. That can work, and triangles, if you do it right. This is in Venice, one of many in Venice. I think I've walked around this. This is so many sites in Venice. Of course, see all the basic things, the main things. Transformation of form, and you've all seen this is my recent project here, where I'm trying. So I didn't want to make something that stood out. You know, it's an old farmhouse, and I do love the old farmhouses around here. And this is a summer house, summer kitchen, and then a shop that was actually, I believe, a slaughterhouse at one point. This is a 150-year-old building, a big, huge chimney and fireplace you can cook in there. And so, you know, I wanted to stay with respect to the vernacular of the area. And so I built all this over here on that. And I think it stands out. I almost put a big Italian tower on here, but that really would have not fit in the vernacular around here. It's postmodern in a little bit of ways, but I think it complements. So I have two pieces of land. It's actually one big piece, but this parcel over here, I traded the farmer friend of mine to just keep it cut. He can keep the hay to feed his 100 cows. And that worked out fine. There was originally corn on the whole property, and I traded another farmer to harvest the corn if he planted seed. And they made a number of models. So additive form. So this is the original shape. First, I was just going to put a little attic, bump up, bump out, and then I had this addition on the bottom here, and then finally I did something more like the one on the bottom corner on the right. So design choice one was too cramped. Plus, there's thermal problems when you build in an attic, especially in temperate climate like this. It gets very hot and very cold, and to insulate it properly takes away some of the headroom. And even with that, it's going to get hotter than the rest of the house in the summer and colder in the winter. And plus with the limited headspace, so I just ended up storage. But with this bump out of this dormer, I think it could have been a little better. It would have been better, but I almost did that. This was the beginnings of it over here. And then, but I wanted more floor space. So did all this. So the existing building is this here and here. Those two together, plus a shop extension over here, which was the slaughterhouse. And then I built all this, put people in there. Then my former students modeled this first in Minecraft, put that and also in Revit, just for fun. We never got course credit for it. It's my son, so the stuff for free. Grew up in this house, and there it is. So it's additive. Now the barn project. Some of you might actually come over and visit sometime. I can make a field trip. We tore down this most recently, and we have new windows for up here. I built a stairway last summer, a new stairway going up, and that could be a big party spot, kind of wild barn party. Maybe one of my students who lives right down the road can even hear if we have the rock band out there. Of course, ask all the neighbors first. Transformation of form. This is Le Corbusier. He had a lot of analysis kind of things like this. It was kind of mathematical about what he did. Some of his stuff I like, but I credit him mostly for the proliferation of inner city housing projects in the United States and communist bloc nondescript housing towers. But he was revolutionary in his ideas. So you read all this here, but you get the idea of that. Then the feelings evoked spatial tension. This is additive composition as you put pieces together, what you're going to end up with. Oops. As you put the elements together, two boxes like that askew, maybe a tension, or actually depends on where it is. It could be actually complementing each other. You feel more tension with this kind of thing down here. But okay, more additive composition. So linear form, centered form, radiating forms, clustered forms, grid forms. This is more in a whole other lecture. We'll elaborate on some of that. Subtractive, so you can pull a little chunk out. Like I mentioned, that architecture studio intro exercise we did 40 years ago when I was your age. I'm 60 now. Was this kind of thing. You take a cube and you pull out chunks, and what can you get? And you can see some very nice use of this thought in certain condo complexes and things in the inner city if it's done right. Or not even inner city, outside too. There's something outside the city. So upstate New York, get the idea. Subtracting a chunk. Subtracting, not that, that's a cooling tower, but the mind fills in what the eyes do not see. A better example. Here's a basic example. Pulling the chunk out. Pulling the chunk out. Here, definitely. Pulling a chunk out there. If that was flat across, that would be a completely different feel. And it wouldn't be so pleasant. The quad, the piazza that can be created. And that reminds me, I don't want to look at it right now, but in this class this year, for the, I'm recording this, there's a new exercise that I've just posted. It's due in 2 weeks, where I want all of you to go up to the land that is well, on the other side of Cedar Street. It's like the highest ground. If you look up from the library uphill and look at the highest point, go stand up there towards the writer's house before it goes back down again. That is the site for your planned housing project. And I have a site analysis exercise for you. And as part of all the thing, I want you to create a new quad or piazza between your housing down to the library with you know, the dorms on either side and your new dorms at the top of the hill and the library at the bottom. Here's transformation of form and subtractive. So I was involved with this. And this was, so I was in charge of all architecture, engineering, and construction, negotiated all that stuff, and sat with the architect and came up with this form. It was originally going to be these tilt-up concrete walls without any relief, without any, and the blue glass, none of that was there. It was just going to be a big box structure. It was going to be cheaper, but it was not going to be anything special. And I had the authority from the people whose money I was handling to make it a little nicer, a lot nicer. So we started doing this kind of thing. And it ended up getting nominated for an annual award in San Diego. Let's see. Rest of that there. Feel the chunks being pulled out and the relief, the deep windows. If that was just flat concrete, or didn't have this step down feeling there, it would be completely different. And a lot of the buildings around it, like, you know, were like that, really nondescript. So this is the building here, and you can even get a feel from an aerial view that it's something different than the neighbors. I mean, they did a little bit over here with a curve, but most of the neighbors were not so nice. And then this is a picture I just took a couple of years ago. So, you know, this was my project in 85, 86. That was what, 20, 30 something years ago. Back to subtractive form. So here's my barn. And when this was put up, people didn't think of the view that was being blocked, but I did. So I built the house, renovated the house around. Well, before I did that, I started knocking chunks out of the house or out of the barn. First thing I did was with my Sawzall, just cut a hole here in the back of the barn and made a porch. They had animals in here and tractors and things. I'm still renovating the top floor here, but that was all subtractive. And then of course I had the engineer, and I do know structural engineering, proper structure, some 5,000 PSI, high strength concrete and anchor bolts and good heavy timbers, and lateral load too, lateral resistance to lateral load. There's no earthquakes here, but I designed things like this in California for earthquake loads. After I worked for the developers, back for the planning commission for a little bit, and then worked in an engineering consulting firm where we did structure. It was mostly environmental engineering, but construction too, in San Francisco. And so this is the view, which is very nice. Milk dairy farm over here. Everybody's name's on film here, but one of the students listening lives back over here and knows the whole community here. These are really good friends. These are our Mennonite friends. and they're like family. You know, I'm very different than the Mennonites, but they're like the most accepting people. We've gone to their church with them and done a number of things with them. They're some of my favorite people in the world, really. This is the view out that barn. My daughter, she's almost 20 now, and she's in California school. Sure. So you see the subtractive nature here. So I managed to not have the barn block the views by looking around it and also cutting through here until this roof finally rotted away. This was a nice sheltered area, but I have to say it's really nice now to have the sun coming in and have this be a deck. Collision of geometries. When forms collide, each will vie for visual supremacy and dominance. So you want to think about how your forms interact. And I don't agree exactly where some of these that creates tension or not, but for the most part, most people would agree with most of this. The following forms can evolve. Forms subvert individual identities and merge. Okay, maybe. I mean, you can see how one form could dominate another. It's where you obscure the original form. One form receive the other. You know, circle inside a square. And you can see that certainly in churches and things. Forms retain identity and share interlocking portions. This can, to me, feel a little unstable to me. I like things to line up a little more than that, and the circle and square like this, but it depends how you do it. Forms can be separate and linked by a connection of some kind. Right? And that certainly works in a lot of instances. Collisions of geometries. Forms differing in geometry and orientation may be incorporated. So you can see different shapes, how you could put one shape inside the other. I won't read everything here. Perhaps I should take all these words out because you can actually see what's going on here. The words are somewhat of a distraction. You can come back and read all that if you like. This works. This works. I think it works for me because this big round part is nestled such that I feel continuity from this flat surface, this curved surface. I think if it's stuck out too much, not so much. This works too. It's a castle. This is Windsor Castle, where the Queen of England lives. Raises her children, the Windsor family. That's what works. Sun at Windsor Castle. Circle and square. Well, certainly in this context, from plan view, you can make that work. And this is where you connect one to the other. It's not like tension or smashing up against each other, or overlapping, or one dominating the other. These work nicely. An oval inside of the square, piazza, a circle, terrace out here off of a cubic house. This is an ancient one in Italy. This is very famous. I had tickets for this, so I did you can see on my YouTube channel, a survey of 31 Frank Lloyd Wright buildings and a video log of all in and around Chicago. I wanted to get up to Madison, Wisconsin, but it took a week just to do the video log of what I did do in Chicago. And then did a similar thing in Arizona, not as many there, of course. This is Frank Lloyd Wright stomping ground. So the Johnson Wax building, this is a really unique thing, and I could lecture a whole bunch on it. I had tickets, I bought tickets actually to go here online, but then I ran out of time. There's videos you can watch on the PDF again will be down below. This did visit this. This is in Arizona. This is Taliesin West. So Taliesin was the main school. I don't want to go into all the details of that, but Taliesin, Frank Lloyd Wright had a whole trajectory of things happen in his life. And then when he was recovering from one tragedy, he went and got his mother's land and built Taliesin, and then he had a new wife who convinced him to start a fellowship, a college, and that was in Madison, Wisconsin. And then that was Taliesin, and then they opened Taliesin West in Arizona. And every 6 months, the students go from one place to the other, and professors. I have a whole lecture series on that, what's happened with that recently, very recently. Actually happening while I was there last year, and then this follow-up stuff. So surface and edges, too many words on this page, but articulation is how surfaces join to define shape and volume. Articulating group. Too many words here. Surfaces and edges. Okay, let's just look at the pictures, how the edges are creating the space. How corners affect things. Regularity we look for. And how things don't seem quite right if not done certain ways. Even more. Surface and edges. It depends how you treat the adjoint, how you adjoin them. So you see this on corners of buildings, sometimes similar things, and it has a whole different effect. Certainly if you open the corner, it has a big effect, and you open it a certain amount, then it's not just a doorway, but it's changing the form. And rounding corners, I see this now in California, inside houses, you can buy drywall corners that are rounded like this. And it's actually a nice effect. I like it when the radius is not such a large radius. Although I've made a curved wall out of drywall, I can see where I would like to do that in some instances. But just instead of having a sharp corner, it's nice to have a little bit rounded. And they make drywall corners now for that. Here's what I mean about the corner. You can emphasize this. You see this a lot in Rome, actually, and other places. I took this in Trento, Italy. So it's there. I was a visiting professor. Went to a conference and presentation of research one year, and then was a visiting professor the next. The corners reinforced. That corner really makes a difference there. If this was just, it would still be nice. But, if this just turned with a regular corner of pink stucco, plaster, stucco here, be different. So exposed timber framing accentuates edges. You see, so Japan's big on that. You can really see the edges defining things everywhere, and such fine carpentry. Like no nails or screws in something like this. Very typical. So real precision joinery. If you've ever done carpentry and tried to fasten things together without nails and screws, that's tricky. Some mortise and tenon kind of things, or even dovetailing a corner. This is a Buddhist temple. We visited in Narita, but this is Kyoto. We were in Narita, Kyoto, and Osaka for 3 weeks total. Surfaces and edges. Openings at a corner diminish the corner and emphasize the planar qualities of them. So at some point, your cubic shape breaks down. It's not just an accent, but you've now deconstructed the building, and it's something else. In opposition to the emphasis of joints and joinery, round corners emphasize the continuity of forms, surfaces, compactness of the line, softness of the contour. Yeah, in the right context, I agree. I'm not sure this is the right context. It looks like a badminton puck, but I forget where this is. I haven't seen this. Usually I note where the pictures are from. But most in this lecture, other than when you see me mentioning that I've been there, or the notes mention it, these are from the text or the adjoining, the accompanying database of pictures that they give. Okay, about 10 more slides here. So surfaces and edges. Corners define the meeting of two planes carrying a color or pattern across the corner onto adjoining surfaces. Emphasize the line of the form. the colors or patterns and how they interplay around corners or at intersections. Not too many words here again. Surfaces and edges, and our perceptions, contrast between surfaces. I'll just read one of these here. A frontal view reveals the true shape of a plane. Oblique views distort it. Yeah, okay. Okay. Textures certainly matter, direction. It's contrast between the surface color of the plane and that of its field. And how the view, if you're looking at it from an angle or not, makes a difference. The visual weight of a plane and the degree to which it absorbs or reflects light and sound. The texture and color. There's a visual weight as well as engineering. We talk about in green architectural engineering, the acoustics and the passive and active solar effects of different paints and textures. Surface, material, color, and texture influence the visual weight, sure. And surfaces come together. Can make a big difference on a high-rise building, or even a low-rise building. How you articulate the differentiation of floors. If you have a solid flat face with windows poked in the side, it's not the same as if you do something that gives you an idea of the interior space. Surfaces and edges. Again, I would reduce some of the words here. Our perception, I'll just read the bold stuff. Perception of color and texture, influenced by how joined and assembled. So this kind of works. It's a little weird, but works. So this is beautiful. There's different kinds of marble. This is the Basilica in San Marco, in Piazza San Marco in Venice. The verticalness exterior, reinforced the verticalness. This was my first trip to Italy in Genoa. Yeah, again, between the floors, the varying textures and architectural details between the floors. So that's pleasing to me, and I think most people, that I can see that this is a floored building, and the exterior greatly complements the fact that the interior is parsed into planes. Here's another example of the first floor versus the rest of the floors. This is where a guest lectured. This was a 5-story building. Our guests taught a course. This is Japanese researchers who were there during the conference. This is the first visit. Let's see the varying textures and this separation here by this banding. That makes a huge difference. If you think about that in your designs, even on 2-story buildings. I'm not going to go into all this here. This is in my lecture series on Frank Lloyd Wright. I'm writing a book on this, and actually I've updated this whole thing quite a bit here, but this is a homework assignment for students, not in here. Not this year. I might change my mind on this, but this is not planning on asking you to do that. And then this is just things that we've done. This is our architecture studio as well as robotics lab. And these are all student projects down here. There. That's last. All right, so that was 1 hour and 5 minutes. One lecture, 1 hour and 45 minutes. That's a bit much. But on recordings, I can just say, watch half of it this time and the other half And so while we're still recording, let me just go into the course on the, I could show one thing else here. Since we mentioned the student projects, we haven't done it in here, but I'd like to. On the main architecture page, where you see the courses and lecture series and all that, if you click on student designs, there's a whole thing here. And so everybody in here, this is the springtime, and we typically, well, I can't guarantee it's going to be on scholarship day or not. Sometimes that's a little too early to ask you to have your final presentations ready. We got to think about that. But I have recordings of all the past things. And then you could see videos of all that, presentations, and then other work the students have done over the years. And I'm on a committee. I was elected as a faculty representative to the senior staff committee on deciding all planning and construction. And I served that for 3 years. And then I lost the election 3 years ago because people thought I was too friendly with the administration, is what I was told. And I can't deny that. I think the best way to get things done with anybody, even if you're at odds with them sometimes, is to work closely with them. So, and I did. I worked on a number of things. We had a $40 million plans for a project of a public-private partnership with developers that flew in from all around the country and big architects from all the big cities. And listen, and me and 4 trustees and the president and the senior staff got to listen to a whole bunch of stuff. So I got reappointed to the committee by the next president. She just resigned, but then I'm still appointed by the new president. And the reason I mention it is because now I have inside knowledge of what actually is going to get built on the campus. I can't reveal everything, but the students, even before I was on this committee, did things that led to real built projects. And we even had prizes of $5,000 awards for designs for something that's not built on the campus. This actually almost went into fabrication around the country. We did a thing in Africa, a little thing, but I just want to mention the student project. This was a competition where we had 22 judges, including outside architects and engineers. And this arguably led to the Sports Fitness and Wellness Center not just being a tent for soccer practice up near the quads, as it stated in the 1999 master plan, but thanks to me and my students and lobbying and continued work by everybody who wanted it, we got a Sports Fitness and Wellness Center. So I'm mentioning that because the students now have a project in here in this class, which I got to check on the degree of confidentiality on it, but let me just show the assignment. We're still recording here. I don't mind that for this purpose. So this is the next project. This is due in 2 weeks. I almost thought about asking you to run out and get pictures of the sunset because it has the best southern exposure. Most of the campus slopes to the north, which is not ideal, but that part of the campus slopes to the south, and it's a new part. We just acquired that land in the past 10 years or 15 years. But anyway, look at the semester project, Cedar Hill Housing. I'll look at that real quick in a second. And you want to do a site analysis, and you can read all the things here. But you want the quality of land, the views, sunlight, pedestrian and vehicle traffic, present and future potential, water features, watershed, trees, parking, cut and fill excavation needs, et cetera, et cetera. Now, 3 years ago, we actually did this same project, and one of the students is in the class now from 3 years ago. He's our second architectural studies major. And Hugh, you know, I'm talking about you. You have now some knowledge, and you sat through all that. We had 12 judges there, including one of the trustees who was a former CEO of the High Development Company, as well as CEO of Lancaster General Health before that. But and he helped judge things, as well as outside architects and engineers and senior staff. That's a real thing that I can't say when it's going to get built, but if any kind of housing is ever going to get built in any time in the near future, this has a higher probability than others. Now, it's not on any list anywhere, and I go through, it's confidential, but I can tell you it's not on the list anywhere for any capital expenditures or anything yet. Well, it's down the road, but it's prime real estate, and a number of people have thought about it, including trustees and our recent president. And the one, our present president, and the one before it. So let's just look at the syllabus, go in the course syllabus just off of the, in here, we can get to my website too. So this is the project down here. Well, let me open it up in my website. I don't like to be nested inside of there. Do it off of here. Do it in Studio 2. I just control the way you're viewing it. In a second, make it bigger here. This is a little nicer. So here is the project. I just had a meeting with a new committee of VPs and one elected faculty member. I'm appointed, so I'm on there. But this, again, this particular project is not even being talked about right now, but it's been talked about a lot over the years. And we even had drawings made up or sketch. This is by Dirk and Edson and Lidditz. By the way, anybody wants to do an internship or seek employment in architecture or in civil and environmental engineering, close by this one. They sketched out these. This is the land here. This is the college. Here's the library. Here's the dorms. You will make a piazza here, like they're kind of doing here. They alluded to it here, but don't feel locked into this. Students a couple of years ago did all kinds of different designs for this. Hugh, if I would like your design to be different, and I asked for a like semi-student center too in the last one, and that made everybody get distracted by too many designs. You should focus on your dorm building and the piazza, and just have like one dorm building that you repeat, show a footprint of them. And so this is the project for the semester, and by 2 weeks from now, you should have a site analysis of this land. And I won't go into all the details here, but these are master plan pictures from 1999 that have been upgraded recently in 2011 with this here. And you already see that it's thanks to the push by me and others, and a lot of talk about it. Cherry Street now has a walkway back here. I think it should be the main entrance for the college. We should cut off Cedar Street, but that's kind of hard to make happen. Cedar Street is a big pedestrian headache with traffic, and there's no reason not to bring all the sports and even people coming to park back here, even people going back around in here. This would be better than having them piling through Cedar Street, people walking across. So this is your target area here. And these are some things I put together from a while ago. This is from Topographical Maps. And you want to be able to make one of these too. So these are real topographical lines. You're up on top of the hill here, and it slopes down to the south over this way. There's the north arrow here. See, north is this way. So south is this way. And so you want to, if you can get the sun angles and study this land here, this is your land here, and all this where the dorms are going is sloping down towards the sun. Unfortunately, slopes down to this way, not towards the sun over here, but it'd still be a beautiful piazza. So this will be your plaza quad piazza, and then your dorms go here. So you want to study this land. You want to take at least 8 photos, put captions under each of them for 2 weeks from now. I want everybody to do it individually. And right now I'm not thinking of any groups, although Megan, I know you're a little bit, you're a freshman, so you're a little bit at a disadvantage. This is supposed to be the capstone senior course, but since you're wanting me to make an architectural major for you, I thought you should be with me every semester that's possible. And so you maybe can pair up with somebody, and I'll let you think about that. I won't mention anybody, but I know there's somebody on track team with me, but I'll leave it up to you. I still want to see individual work by everybody, and on the site analysis, I do want to see individual work. So this is that. Here's another view. There's Cherry Street. Now, if you go back in there now, there's been a walkway put back through here, or back, winds back through here, a walkway with lights. And this is the Bowers writer's house. And this is really nice land. I mean, it gets a little swampy a little over here. You might want to think about civil engineering, things like grading the dirt and watershed. Most of the watershed goes over this way from the ridge here down to the creek, but that's something to consider. And consider the access that you're going to be coming from Cherry Street. But this is your semester project. This is worth half of your grade. We'll have progress reports and things And I might put a big party of judges together if I can. Certainly could get the senior staff in there and the new head of all construction and everything. And Betty, the new president, she actually judged this last time, as well as one of the trustees and several deans. Hugh, you remember that, you were in there. Hugh, you have prior knowledge, and then there's the whole exercise. I do want people to start learning Revit in here. Again, Megan, you're at a little bit of disadvantage. When you take green architecture engineering, everybody has to do some Revit, or at least that was my intent. People lobbied and got me to let them use SketchUp, but I really, really would rather see Revit because you can go, I know for a fact, right into industry and use those skills in a lot of places, engineering and architecture. It is an industry standard software. All right, I'm going to stop recording here because we've got an hour and 15 minutes, and then we can discuss this a little bit. First, I have to stop sharing, and then stop the video down here. Stop recording. These are the topic buttons here. Stop.